Hi everyone, hope you've had a great week. Today you'll be starting part 3 of the book Wild Ones, which is called Birds, and specifically it's about a type of bird that is endangered called the whooping crane. So, as you've read, part 1 was about polar bears, part 2 was about the Lang's meadowlark butterfly, and part 3 we're starting right now. So, here's what you need to know before you begin Chapter 11, Construction Workers. The first thing is, what is a whooping crane? They're tall, thin white birds. They almost look like white flamingos. They like marshy, wet areas where they can sort of dunk their heads underwater and hunt for food. They have a big wingspan, like 3 to 5 feet. They're pretty big, majestic looking white birds, and they're endangered. There's only a few hundred left on Earth. And 50 years ago, there were even less. The population of whooping cranes on Earth was down to like 40 or 50 birds. So they're actually a species that has rebounded. I believe when this book was written, there were 275 whooping cranes, which is a pretty big rebound if you go from 50 to almost 300 in a few decades. So now the situation for the whooping crane is much better, and John is sort of investigating how they're planning to spread the species. Because right now, there's a population that spends the summers in Alberta, Canada, and the winters in Texas. And what they want to do is put a second population of birds, also that's going to spend the summer in Canada, but it's going to migrate down to Florida. And the question is, how do you do that? And Chapter 11 is going to introduce a plan to do that called Operation Migration. It's a really crazy idea where basically you're dressing up airplanes to look at birds, and you're leading the birds on a migration path from Canada down to Florida. Now, how do you do that with a delicate species like the whooping crane? It's really tough. These birds imprint upon whatever human or bird they come into contact with at a young age, so you can't have them interacting with humans, and yet you have to get the birds to migrate about 1,000 miles. So how they end up attempting to do that is actually very, very complicated. I won't give away all the details, but it's a pretty fascinating story of training these birds to migrate, even though these birds have been bred in captivity. They can't rely on their parents to learn how to migrate because they weren't bred in the wild. So that will be the beginning of Chapter 11. John will be with Operation Migration, and he'll learn all about the struggles that surround the whooping